Are Americans more comfortable with women in positions of corporate power than political power? According to a survey associated with the Women Political Leaders Global Forum, which is currently taking place in Iceland, that is exactly the case. Earlier, I sat down with Michelle Harrison, the global CEO of Kantar Data and Consulting Group, to talk about the numbers behind women in leadership and the work that still needs to be done. So tell me, what does the Reykjavik Index measure and how do you measure it?
So the Reykjavik Index for Leadership is a measure of how men and women are viewed across the countries in the G7 and some others in terms of their suitability for leadership. So it's an assessment of how people across all walks of society look at men and women and determine whether or not they're suitable to lead.
So this is the second year that you have done this, looked at how women perceive men and women as leaders. What has changed between last year and this year?
So the Reykjavik Index measures how societies view men and women in terms of their suitability for leadership. And last year, the UK came out top of the Reykjavik Index. Now remember, top is still a place where there is a lot of inequality and women are not viewed as equal or as suitable for leadership as men are. But nonetheless, the UK was doing very well across the G7. And in the last year, that's fallen several points, so it's fallen to fourth place. And that change has come from male attitudes. It's men who have reduced their confidence or increased their discrimination towards women as leaders, and that the sectors that has occurred in has been in politics and the economy and the judiciary and foreign affairs.
How does the US rank?
So the US has dropped by 1 point. So overall, we have France and Canada as equal first and the US below them. So across the G7 group, the US is a stronger performer. But there has been a drop, and it's a similar thing. The drop has come from men more than women. And in the US, there is an important difference between the way that society views men and women in terms of their suitability for leadership. Men are 10 points less confident in the way that they view women. The other important issue with the US, which is different to any other country that we've studied, is we ask the question, how suitable do you think a woman is to be head of state? And how suitable do you believe a woman is to be head of a major corporation in your country? And in the US, women come out absolutely top as being viewed as suitable for corporate leadership. So of all the countries we've studied, they are ranked highest in the US. However, there's still a very significant amount of discrimination around that, because only 61% of the American people are entirely confident with the idea of a woman as a CEO. But if we look at this in terms of the question around how confident Americans feel about a woman as head of state, we see a very different picture. And there, only 54% of Americans say that they are entirely confident with the idea of a woman as the head of state, i.e. the president, and there's a big variation there between men and women. Only 49% of American men say they are entirely confident of a woman as head of state. So what that means is the majority of American men carry a significant prejudice against the idea of female political leadership in the highest office.
Very interesting. So as you're talking about both the UK and the US, I was sort of thinking, what are high profile, I guess, losses, if you will, for women, right, recently? And I thought about Theresa May stepping down, and then also about Hillary Clinton losing the 2016 election, both very high profile losses, if you will. Do you think that has had an impact on the drop that both the UK and the US has seen?
So I think obviously current affairs are going to have an impact on these attitudes, but it may also be something to do with the particular moment we're at in politics in both the UK and in the USA, because also the declines in confidence are coming mainly from men rather than women. And if we look at the sectors that have been influenced in the UK, they're the same as have been influenced in the US. So overall, the US ranks quite highly in terms of its confidence of women in the judiciary or in foreign affairs, but it has declined over the last year, specifically in those sectors, and the decline in confidence has come from men rather than women. So perhaps there's something about the kinds of political leadership that we're experiencing at the moment, the political trajectories these countries are in, and how that may put back the cause of gender equality.
Do you ask in the survey why people feel the way they feel?
So the study, the Reykjavik Index, is the evidence base to understand how people feel about men and women in leadership. And what it does is it gives us a new understanding of how people across all walks of life view men and women. But the next step then is to understand what can be done to deal with that degree of prejudice that we find. And I've talked about how men tend to have less confidence in female leadership than women, but there is also prejudice amongst women too. I mean, if we look overall across the whole of the G7 countries, less than half of society are highly confident in men and women being entirely equal in the way that they are entitled to leadership roles. So the work that we now need to do is to think about how we can change those attitudes.
All right, Michelle, thank you. This is a really fascinating study.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.